us through this.
Have you ever noticed how location data is always accurate, right up until it matters? Because here's the dirty secret of GIS in public safety. Your map does not usually break. It just slowly lies. One parcel gets split, one road gets renamed. One PSAP boundary gets tweaked for just this one little thing. Somebody updates a layer, somebody else doesn't. And then 6 months later, a 911 call gets routed to the wrong place, and everyone swears the system randomly failed. It didn't fail randomly. It failed predictably. Today I want to talk about location drift, polygon drift, boundary decay, and the quiet little gap between where the map says you are and where you're actually located. Because in Next Generation 911, the map is not a picture, it's a router. And that's coming up next on TiPS, Today in Public Safety.
Welcome to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Here's your host, Fletch, with today's tips.
Welcome to TiPS, Today in Public Safety. This is Fletch. I'm a NENA-certified ENP, and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I bring you the latest, most informative, and directionally challenged takes on emergency communications. Today we're taking a deep dive into the location drift disaster, why your map slowly lies. Now let me set the stage. Most people think GIS issues are one-time problems. Like, you fix the map, you high-five the team, you print that big new wall poster, and you're done. Nope. GIS issues are usually slow motion. A little bit of drift, a little bit of decay, and a few, we meant to update that, but the guy who kept up with it retired. And then you wake up one day and your boundaries are technically correct in one data set, sort of correct in another, and absolutely wrong in the one that's actually doing call routing. Now, if you only remember one line from this episode, make it this one. In Next Generation 911, boundaries are logic, not art. If boundaries drift, routing drifts. It's as easy as that. Location drift, what it actually is. Location drift isn't one big dramatic error, it's 1,000 tiny ones that accumulate. Here are some of the usual culprits. A new subdivision goes in and the addressing gets finalized late. A municipality annexes a sliver of land and nobody updates the boundary in all systems. Maybe a road gets realigned, or a private drive becomes public, or the name changes. Maybe a parcel gets subdivided, but now the front door is on a different street. Or a campus adds a building, and the internal location system uses a naming convention that doesn't match anything the PSAP has ever seen. Each one of these is small. Each one of these looks survivable. But in each one of these, Next Generation 911 location isn't just where the dot appears. Location information is used to pick which PSAP gets the call, and quite often, which responders get dispatched, which policies trigger, and which mutual aid plan gets activated. So drift is not cosmetic. Drift is operational. Polygon drift and boundary decay. The silent routing problem. Let's talk about polygons. Polygons are those invisible shapes that define service boundaries. PSAP boundaries, law and fire boundaries, EMS zones, special districts, campuses, and tribal areas. They also mark rail corridors, highway responsibility zones, and all the rest of the stuff that nobody thinks about until the wrong agency shows up. Now, polygon drift happens when those boundaries stop matching reality over time. Boundary decay happens when the integrity of the boundary data degrades across systems. And here's how it shows up in real life. You have one boundary in GIS, another boundary in the call handling system, another boundary gets used by CAD, and another boundary in a neighboring county's data set. And of course, the state has got their own boundary in their aggregated layer. Now, they're all pretty close until they're not. And when your emergency call routing function and the location validation function are working from data that's pretty close, you get pretty close routing, which in public safety terms isn't a compliment. The map is the router moment. Why this matters in NG 911. In Legacy 911, you could get away with a little bit of sloppiness because routing often leaned heavily on the telephone number. That meant alley records and fixed service boundaries coming from the telco database. Not perfect, but the failure modes were familiar. In NG 911, location is central. It's the core input. It feeds validation and routing decisions. So when the map drifts, you don't just get a slightly wrong dot. You get the wrong PSAP, the wrong responder recommendations, the wrong auto aid, the wrong jurisdiction flags, and the wrong run cards, the wrong everything, and you get it quickly. Then it turns into a blame festival, or that certain kind of show that's got that special name we can't say here. Now the network blames GIS blames addressing blames planning blames the developer blames the process, and the process blames the calendar for moving forward. Meanwhile, the call happened. A simple example that ruins everybody's day. Picture a boundary that follows a creek. Over the years, the creek gets recharted or the partial lines get modernized. A brand new survey comes in and the county updates the parcel layer. But the municipal boundary data set doesn't get updated. And maybe the PSAP boundary data set updates, but the fire boundary data set doesn't. And the CAD layer is close enough so nobody bothers to touch it. Now a caller in a new cul-de-sac calls 911. And their device location lands near the boundary. The validation process picks up the wrong side of the line because that line is not the same line everywhere. So the call routes to PSAP A, and the actual jurisdiction is PSAP B. No problem, PSAP A transfers. But the transfer takes time. So if you're lucky, that's the end of the story. But if you're not lucky, it is an active incident, and you just burned the one thing, how to stop drift from turning into outages. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not about chasing perfection. It's about building a discipline. And here are the moves that actually work. First of all, you need to treat boundary data sets like critical infrastructure. Not like a GIS project, not like a GIS layer. Actual critical infrastructure. Second, define an authoritative source for each boundary type. That means a PSAP boundary authority, a fire authority, a law authority, and an EMS authority. Oh, and don't forget the campus authority for those enterprises. Then you make sure that everybody knows what authoritative means. Third, you version your boundaries. If you can't answer what changed, when, and why, you're living on hope, and hope is not a strategy. Fourth, create a schedule for reconciliation. Now, I don't mean once a year. I don't mean when we've got time. I mean a real cycle. And base it on the number of changes that you get through. Fifth, make sure you test your routing outcomes and not just the geometry. Don't just stare at the lines. Run sample locations. Validate, route, confirm the PSAP, confirm the agency, confirm any policy triggers. Sixth, watch the seams. Most of the errors happen at the edges. Jurisdiction borders, municipal borders, state lines, tribal borders, PSAP consolidation boundaries, and campuses that straddle everything. And finally, don't ignore the human part, because the best boundary in the world will still decay if nobody owns it. Now, ownership isn't just a feeling. Ownership is a name, a responsibility, and a calendar invite that keeps showing up. The reality check. If your next generation 911 plan assumes that GIS is done once you migrate, you're planning to fail slowly. And the worst part is you won't notice until the first time a call lands wrong, and everybody starts staring at the screen like it betrayed them. Now, it didn't betray you. It told you exactly what you fed it. Location drift isn't a technology issue, it's a maintenance problem, a governance problem, and a change management problem. And yeah, it's also a funding problem because all of those things cost money and you can't maintain what you never budgeted to maintain. But that's not a mystery. The bottom line. Remember, in NG911, your map is your router. If your boundaries drift, your routing drifts. So stop treating GIS like a pretty picture and start treating it like the operational system that it is. Put owners on the boundaries, version them, reconcile them when they're wrong. Be sure you test the outcomes and guard the seams. Because the map won't fail loudly. It'll fail very politely, very quietly, and over time. Just like a smoke alarm with a dying battery. If you ignore that annoying beep long enough, it'll eventually stop, but you'll realize it at the worst possible moment, when you start screaming. That wraps up today's episode of TiPS, Today in Public Safety. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you have a deeper view on GIS and the important role that it plays in our next generation 911 ecosystem. For more updates and insights, remember to follow me on social media at Fletch 911. You can go to 911tips.com for a complete archive of all of my previous episodes. My blogs are online at fletch.tv and my professional website is fletch911.com. Stay safe. Thanks so much for listening. And if you're in public safety, thanks for what you do every single day. Stay safe. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Hosted by Fletch and available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Catch past episodes on 911tips.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to join us each week for the latest on NG911. I am Spider Harrison, the official 911 voiceover dude. Catch me on Sirius XM on various channels, including 90s on 9, the 10 spot, and on the Weekend Countdown on Hits 1. Or don't regret it for the rest of your life. Either way, I'm good.